This is Business Law 431, our exploration of the Business Ethics Workshop, Chapter 1, presented by Kelly Herzik. We will begin with our overview of Chapter 1. This is where the actual online text is located. I also have it located in Blackboard. There is an actual link, but I wanted to put it here too for you just in case. So Chapter 1 is entitled, What is Business Ethics? It's a background chapter. We'll define business ethics. We'll talk about the place of business ethics. We'll ask the question, is business ethics really necessary? First question to ask in this chapter is, what is business ethics? Many people think business ethics is nothing more than going with their gut reaction on what's right or wrong. Does it pass the smell test? And they don't really go any further than that. But doing business ethics actually means providing reasons for how things ought to be in the economic world. Business ethics actually requires thought, and there are four main requirements for business ethics. The first is arranging your values to guide your decision. There has to be a clearly defined and well justified set of priorities about what's worth seeking and protecting and what other things we're willing to compromise or give up. Values is about choices and making a choice about what's most important. But the biggest thing I think for business ethics is understanding the facts. So many people go off, as they say, half-cocked and don't really investigate the facts before they make a decision. Ethics really requires you to understand the facts because you have to understand the facts to effectively apply a set of values to any situation. So the situation itself must be carefully defined. Then, after you get the facts, after you've accumulated knowledge, then you can begin constructing your argument. To construct an argument, this shows how, given the facts, one action serves our values better than other actions. Now, the argument should make sense to others, including outside observers. Ethics, at its best, is transparent, and the basis upon which an ethical decision is being made should be apparent to everyone. And at the end of the test, basically you make a determination about what is right and wrong. Remember, conclusions are only taken seriously if they are composed from clear values, recognized facts, and solid arguments. Business ethics really requires you to make rational decisions based on values and morality, using the facts of a situation to analyze the issues and make constructive arguments in support of a proposed action, rather than going with your gut or a hunch. So let's talk about ethical arguments, because one of the best things about a good ethical argument is that it invites counter-argument, meaning that it intends to create discourse or dialogue on the issue between parties. Well-developed ethical positions expose their reasoning openly. Remember, I said it has to be transparent as opposed to the it just doesn't smell right. So they intend to invite responses from other parties. There are three ways to dispute an argument in ethics. You can attack the facts, the values, or the reasoning. Ultimately, you have to remember that there's a difference between responding to an ethical problem by asserting that something doesn't smell right or feel right, I just don't like it, and responding by uniting the facts, values, and reasoning to produce a substantial ethical argument. Making an ethical argument in many ways is like making a legal argument. We really, as lawyers, do the same thing when we are formulating a legal argument. We gather the facts, we decide what's important for our clients, that values that the client wants to put forth in court, and we then create reasoning and arguments to support those positions. If you go up to a judge and say, well, judge, it's just not fair as an argument, that's not going to get you very far. That's it doesn't smell right. It doesn't feel right. It just ain't fair, judge. That's your gut talking. But that's not an ethical argument. Okay? But in law, as in ethics, a well organized and thoughtful argument supported by facts and the specific legal arguments or the specific legal reasoning and the law will win every day. And the same is true with ethical arguments. Next, we're going to discuss the place of business ethics. Now, business ethics as a formal area of academic study is relatively new. Now, the study of ethics is as old as time, it goes back centuries. But business ethics as an academic area of study really only dates to the 20th century, the last quarter of the 20th century. And in delineating the specific place of today's business ethics involves distinguishing morality, ethics, and metaethics, dividing normative from descriptive ethics, comparing ethics against other forms of decision making, and sketching some inflection points in the history of ethics and business ethics. We're going to talk about each of those points as we progress through the slides. Well, now we're going to talk about the difference between morality, ethics, and metaethics. Because there are three distinct levels of consideration about basic right and wrong. Morality is the rules. Ethics is the making of rules, and metaethics concerns the origin of the entire discussion on morals and ethics. That's just a good summary of the differences between the three. So morality is rules, ethics is making the rules, and metaethics is kind of a macro discussion. So let's start with morality or morals. Morals occupy the lowest level. Morality only involves specific guidelines that should be followed. I mean, they are the direct rules or moral dictates we ought to follow, like don't lie, don't steal, don't kill. Generally, the question to ask about a moral directive is just whether it was obeyed. And now think about the difference between morality and criminality because they are not the same thing. Law is often based in morality, but does not, of course, have complete overlap with morals in society. Some things may be seen in society as morally wrong, but are not a crime under criminal law or a tort in civil law. Okay? So take the moral directive, don't lie. This is something we learn as kids, that it's wrong to lie. Lying may be morally wrong, but is generally not criminalized unless you're under oath, which is perjury, or talking to law enforcement or obstructing justice. For example, under federal law, it's a crime to lie to the FBI. Generally, there are not laws against lying to the public or the media, for example. We have free speech rights under the First Amendment. Of course, no right is absolute, and there are limits, of course. There are civil laws like defamation, which is an intentional tort that we'll get to later, that prohibit certain lies that defame people and harm their reputation in society. But the penalty is paying damages in tort law, not going to jail. Go back to Chapter 1 and the definition of law. Law is the rules of conduct in any organized society that are enforced by the governing authority or the community. Think of morals as things we should follow, while laws are rules of conduct we must follow or face potential punishment, either criminal or civil. Now, ethics is the next level, and it's above morality. It is the broader question about what specific rules should be instituted and followed. Answering this question is ethics. It's the morality factory, the production of the guidelines that later may be obeyed or violated. Lastly, we're going to discuss metaethics. Metaethics is above both morality and ethics because that's where the debates about morality and ethics happen, at the metaethics level. These are the most abstract and theoretical discussions surrounding right and wrong, and it's often debated in philosophy classes. It's above the level at this class. We're not going to be getting down in the weeds in philosophy, but I wanted you to understand what metaethics is, that it's kind of that macro look at what morality and ethics are. The questions asked at this level include, where do ethics come from? Why do we have ethical and moral categories in the first place? And to whom do the rules apply? Now, some believe morality is transcendent in nature and comes from a source beyond humanity, such as divine or religious law. Others believe ethics is very human and social in nature, that it's something we invented to help us live together in communities and societies. And other theories postulate that ethics and morality are deeply personal in nature, egocentric. And we will go through some of the sources of these rules as we progress. I wanted to discuss law versus ethics, how they're different. This is actually not in the business ethics workshop information per se, but I think it's important information for you to have. So I've put together a chart here on this slide that differentiates between law and ethics. And these differences are important, and this is what might be testable. So this chart is a big clue for you in terms of studying. Now, ethics is based on well founded standards of right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. By ethics, we mean that branch of moral philosophy that guides people about what's good or bad, right or wrong. It's a collection of fundamental concepts and principles of an ideal human character or of a society as a whole. The ethical principles help us in making decisions regarding what is right or wrong, and they inform us about how to act in a particular situation and make a judgment to make better choices for ourselves. Ethics are the code of conduct agreed upon and adopted by the people in society. It sets a standard of how a person should live and interact with others in their communities. It's easy to see how ethics, which is the making of rules for society to function, can be much closer to the definition of law than we think, but they are still different. Remember that the law consists of a set of rules and regulations, whereas ethics comprises guidelines and principles that inform people about how to live or how to behave in a particular situation. Violation of the law leads to punishment, but there can be consequences for violating ethical standards, such as social isolation, loss of a job, or loss of a state license, such as attorneys who violate the ethical rules. On this slide, I've given you the major differences between law and ethics. Remember that the law is defined as a systematic body of rules that governs the whole society and the actions of its individual members. It's regulatory, we have to follow it. But ethical rules are generally considered aspirational. They're who we hope to be, who we want to be. Ethics involves the science of standard human conduct. We're looking for that ideal character of an individual or of a society. As I said, the law consists of a set of rules and regulations, but ethics comprises guidelines and principles. That's the major difference, right? The law is rules and regulation, ethics is guidelines and principles. The law is created by the government, which can be local, regional, national, or international. On the other hand, ethics are governed usually by individual legal or professional norms like workplace ethics, professional ethics, social ethics, and environmental ethics. The law is expressed in the Constitution, case law, and statutes, and it's usually in written form. But ethics are often unwritten, though there are some ethical rules that are written down, like the attorney's rules of professional conduct. If we violate the rules of professional conduct, we can lose our law license, and that's a pretty big deal. So the rules of professional conduct are written down. Now, the breach of law can result in punishment or penalty. And that's not the case of a breach of ethics generally. Usually, you don't go to jail for a breach of ethics unless it's also a violation of criminal law. The objective of the law is to maintain social order and peace within a nation and give protection to all the citizens. Now, unlike law, ethics are the code of conduct that helps a person decide what is right or wrong and how to act. The law is legally binding, but ethics has no such legal binding on people. I want to move on to normative and descriptive ethics. I'm kind of picking up back where the business ethics workshops left off. Business ethics is normative, which means it concerns how people ought to act. Normative ethics involves trying to make a decision about whether an action is justified. The question is about the justification. That's what the study is about. The question that would be asked is, well, if I have no money, can I steal this book? If I'm starving, should I steal this loaf of bread? Descriptive ethics depicts how people are actually acting. By contrast, that is an investigation to determine the exact number of students that actually walked out with free books. That's descriptive ethics. You're looking at studies depending on the event, such as stealing the book, actually occurring. So that's a study that deals with how many people actually stole the book versus normative ethics, which is asking the question, is stealing the book justified because you're broke? We make decisions every day, and they're not always based on ethics. It's perfectly possible and frequently reasonable to make choices based on other factors, like the law, obeying the law, prudence or practicality, what our religion says, what our mother says, our authority figures, peer pressure, custom, or conscience. I want to briefly discuss history and ethics. I want to hit the high points because, as I told you, ethics as a discipline has been studied for centuries. It's only business ethics that is relatively new. Unlike science, there's no strict historical advance to the study of ethics. And there's really no reason to confidently say that the way we practice ethics today is superior to how we did it in the past. So here are the high points, the key historical moments. These are the ones you probably need to know for testing purposes. In ancient Greece, it was Plato who thought that we could gain general knowledge of justice and allow a clear resolution to every specific ethic dilemma. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the theory of natural rights gained popularity. This is the idea that individuals are naturally and undeniably endowed with rights to their own lives, their freedom, and to pursue happiness as they see fit, as long as those actions don't interfere with the rights of others. I think that probably sounds familiar to you because that's really what our Constitution is based on: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it's opposed to the notion that certain acts are firmly right or wrong. Proponents of the natural rights theory, and that's including John Locke and the framers of our new American nation, they propose that individuals may sort things out as they please as long as their decisions and actions don't interfere with the rights of others to do the same. This is frequently understood as a theory of freedom maximization. The proposition is that your freedom is only limited by the freedoms others possess. Now, in the 19th century, a third important historical direction in the history of ethics originated with the proposal that it doesn't matter so much what you do as what the effects of what you do. Right and wrong are found in the consequences of following an action, not the action itself. The ends justify the means. In the 20th century, ethics has been influenced by Nietzsche and his affirmation that moral codes and everything else are just interpretations of reality that may be accepted now, but there's no guarantee things will remain that way tomorrow. The answer is always it depends, and it's known as a theory of cultural or contextual relativism. It's also known as postmodernism. And in that theory, what's right and wrong only reflects what a particular person or community decides to believe at a certain moment, and there's little else in contextual relativism. Business ethics is a subfield in ethical study. Business ethics divide between ethics practiced by people in the business world and business ethics as a coherent and well-defined academic pursuit. This means that business ethics is being studied at colleges and universities, but it's actually operating out in the business world. It's being practiced every day by business people. Traditionally, in the business world, people judge organizations as more or less ethical based on the degree to which they pursue self-interest or profits. Business ethics as an academic pursuit is relatively new. The first full-scale academic business ethics conference was in our state at the University of Kansas in 1974. By the mid-1990s, the study of business ethics had matured and there were widespread classes in business ethics at colleges and universities. The development of business ethics inside universities corresponded with increasing public awareness of problems associated with modern economic activity, particularly on environmental and financial fronts. Next, I want to discuss the personal history of ethics. Almost every adult engages in business ethics, though it changes from person to person, and it can change for us throughout our lives. As our different values change, things become more or less important to us as we age, as we marry, as we have children. That's why the personal history of ethics can change and grow depending on who the person is and their life experiences. Personal ethics generally develops based on theories by Lawrence Kohlberg. Pre-conventional behavior is the first step, and it's about people calculating to get what they want efficiently. Decisions are made in accordance with raw self-interest. This is often associated with children, though not always. In the conventional stages, the idea of what you'll do separates from what you want. First, in this stage, there are immediate conventions that may pull against personal desires. They include standards and pressures applied by family and friends. Next, more abstract conventions, the law and mass social customs can insert influence. Next, the critical stage of moral development goes from recognizing abstract conventions to actively and effectively comparing them. The study of business ethics belongs on this high level of individual maturity. Value systems are held up side by side, and reasons are erected for selecting one over the other. This is the ethics of full adulthood. Yes, you have to adult. It requires good reasoning and experience in the real world. Next, I want to turn to the ethics of responsibility. It's the flip side of ethics and morality, in a sense. If morality is the rules we follow, and ethics is the making of specific rules, then it follows that someone who violates the rules can be held accountable. So, coextensive with the development of ideas about what we ought to do are notions about responsibility, about justifiably blaming people for what they've done. Responsibility at its lowest level is physical. For example, the person who stole the book is responsible because they took it. More abstractly, responsibility attaches to notion of causing others to do a wrong, like egging someone on to do violence or to commit vandalism, or not doing something that could have prevented a wrong. Mature assignment of responsibility normally requires the following considerations: that the person is able to understand right and wrong. People who suffer from a mental disease or defect often cannot distinguish between right and wrong. The person acts to cause or fails to act to prevent a wrong. The person acts knowingly, which just means that they know what they're doing. And the person acts from their own free will and not under duress, for example, like having a gun held at your head. Next, we're going to ask the question, is business ethics really necessary? At the boundaries of that question about whether business ethics is necessary, there are rather conflicting and extreme perceptions of what the business world is about. These are the main views at the very far end of left and right. On one side, there are the people who believe business needs policing because it's a dirty enterprise teaching people who get ahead by being selfish liars who are all out for themselves and to steal money. Successful businesses, on the other hand, work well to enrich society, and business ethicists are interfering and annoying scolds who threaten to ruin our economic welfare, which is a fancy way of saying that the people in academia don't know what it's like out here in the real world. Opposing the view that business life is corrupt and needs serious ethical policing, there is the view that economic enterprises provide wealth for our society while correcting their own excesses and problems internally, meaning they self-police. This internal correction is said to occur through the marketplace. And the idea is that the pressures of demanding consumers force companies into reputable behavior. The idea is that the market and companies will self-police and that they don't need regulation or business ethics. There are flaws in the idea that business ethics is not necessary and that the market can self-police. But for the sake of argument, even if it's acknowledged that economic forces effectively police commerce, that doesn't mean business ethics is unnecessary or a threat to the market economy. Actually, they can function well and side by side. What's most valued from the perspective of those that believe business ethics is unnecessary is individual welfare and the freedom to pursue it without guilt or remorse. However, others can be guided by the same rules, and therefore everyone has to look out for themselves and actively protect their own interests, since no one will be doing it for them. So much for self policing, right? In this model, right and wrong comes to be defined by the combined force of cautious, self interested producers and consumers. However, in the modern world of commerce, it can be difficult for consumers, particularly, protect their interests in every situation, which causes a breakdown in self-ethical policing. There are also flaws on the flip side for the views of the people who believe that business is corrupt and must be regulated ethically. It's just simply not true that doing business equals being deceitful. So it's false to assert that business ethics is necessary to cure the ills of commerce. There's a fallacy in that logic. And even if the business world is left to control its own excesses through marketplace pressure, that doesn't mean that businesses escape ethics. Because ethics is the arrangement of values guiding our aspirations and actions, some form of ethics is unavoidable for everyone acting in the economic world. Further, the application of business ethical principles and guidance doesn't stop when the workday ends or outside the company door. Our economic lives today mingle so intimately with our private existences that the decisions and reasoning shaping our work often shape our lives generally. And when you look at the bottom line, the only real and durable difference between those who understand ethics and those who don't is that the former achieve a level of self understanding about what they want. They've compared their values with other possibilities and molded their actions to their decisions. The latter are doing the same thing, they're just doing it without fully realizing it. This is the end of chapter 1.